You all.
Okay, so we're having some technical problems. We're just 2 minutes after the hour, so let's just I'll backtrack. And as I was sharing with the audience that we're here, I think this is our first Zoom, American United International, our first Zoom for interview for 2022. And as I noted, it's Tuesday, February 8th, 2022. I'm your co-host, Dr. Zena Crenshaw-Logal, and I've been joined now by my beautiful co-host, Ms. Belinda Parker-Brown. Can you hear us? And do you want to say hello to our audience?
Yes, Dr. Z, I can hear very well. And I would like to say good evening. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing good and being safe with all of this craziness going on in the world. But I am so excited to be here with you all tonight. Let's go right ahead and welcome everyone.
And our guests. Yes, you know, I mentioned that you are our CEO of Louisiana United International, which is a nonprofit corporate sponsor of America United International. Tonight, we're going to be interviewing Maryann Petri. She's the author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, and she's a very popular host of the podcast known as Slam the Gavel. So we have a live audience joining us here on Zoom. I'm sure that's all due to Ms. Petri and you. And we're going to meet her in just a few moments. Let me do a little housekeeping, if you don't mind. I explained that due to some setting changes, we have not been able to live stream on Facebook, but we're going to get an edited version of this presentation out and circulated on the various social network platforms. So we won't be able to bring in a live audience from Facebook, but we got some wonderful people joining us here on Zoom. Those of you who are joining us on Zoom, we want you to, I want to encourage you to use our chat section to comment on our presentation today. Just, you know, feel free to chat among yourselves. But if you have a question for for Ms. Petri or Ms. Belinda Parker-Brown or myself, if you could use Q&A to share your question with us, and that way we are less likely to miss it in the chat. So use the chat to chat, but when you have a specific question and you want an answer to it, if you can use, you should see at the bottom of your screen, the Q&A section, and use that to present, and we'll get notification that you have a question, and we'll try to find an opportunity sometime during the program to answer it, get it answered. Our guest, Mrs. Petri, has been warned that we're going to be putting her to work as we usually do on these AUI interviews. We call it a reverse interview. And how that goes is we have our guests share their knowledge and impressions of America United International as a way of us getting to know them before they give us detailed information about their relevant work. So, I mean, how great is that? We get, you know, our guests to really basically promote our campaign, and it's just wonderful. We found that we've gotten some excellent some really good positive input and critiques by using this thing we call reverse interview. So we're going to be asking Ms. Petri to tell us her impressions of American United International. And I've explained many times the format is like you're on a quiz show, but you're the masked singer, because we don't get into a lot of detail about your background, so you're like unknown to our audience. But on the other hand, it's sort of like a this is your life situation, because we're going to get to know Mrs. Petri and her work and her views quite well. So let's dig in and see how this goes. Mrs. Parker-Brown, if you have something, don't have any more to add, I'll bring Ms. Petri come on the screen. Do you have any other preliminary comments for our audience?
No, Dr. Z, let's go right ahead and jump in. I'm excited about getting started and getting to know as much as we can about Ms. Petri and the great work that she has been doing.
Okay, so Ms. Petri, go ahead and unmute your microphone. And we're going to get into this reverse interview. So please share with our audience your description. You can say hi, first of all.
Hello,
But
and
then,
thank you.
there you go. But we want you to share with our audience your description of America United International in as much detail as you think they need to understand what the campaign is about. As I said, we're putting you to work. So
Okay.
go ahead.
I can do it.
There you go.
I thank you for having me on your show. This grassroots movement, the AUI, the American United International, helps inform and bring to the end the weaponization of American legal and judicial corruption, which is rampant on so many levels and destroys so many lives, even our future children. The AUI helps people understand what goes on in the justice system that not only keeps some of their courtrooms behind closed doors, but their corruption is so secretive. There are many levels of injustice that the public does not know about, much less aware of, unless it is a violent act that ends up on the national news. No one understands any of this until it happens to them. Behind closed doors, judges are placing gag orders, and good fit parents are put in prison. Their kids are being taken away on false allegations or blatantly increasing the arrears on child support payments at their whim. And this is done on an hourly basis in these courtrooms every day. American United International helps people understand how the judicial and legal misconduct happened. Many people are so distraught over the injustice that has happened to them. Everyone should know and share information on AUI so others will be informed of the corrupt legal and government system that allows this to perpetuate.
Isn't that wonderful? I mean, you just can't get better, input. You better, we got our guests just talking in such glowing terms about America United International. But you talked about weaponization of the legal system, corruption. You're talking about judges in an arbitrary and capricious way and injustice. Is this a third world country that you're talking about?
I think it's come to that. I think it really has. It's global. It's a global problem.
Yes, but this notion that there's a weaponization of the U.S. legal system, as I've worked on an international basis, and Ms. Belinda can attest to it. Our country, we have the gold standard of legal systems around the world. I mean, there's no such thing as perfect justice. There's miscarriages of justice, but insofar as a fair and impartial administration of justice, people generally believe you can't get much better than the United States legal system. So tell us more about how these issues are relevant to your life or to your work and how you came to these conclusions. Go ahead, Ms. Petri.
Well, it's relevant because, the Bar Association is actually the British Accreditation Registry. And that's kind of disturbing to me because, we fought the Revolutionary War to end our ties with Great Britain, yet they're still in our backyard. And apparently they're global as well, from what I've been learning. And our courts are controlled. It's just people feel helpless and people need to be empowered and almost just go pro se without attorneys.
Now, these findings of yours, do you go into detail about them in your book, Dismantling Family Court Corruption?
Yes.
Tell us about that. What did you do? Was there personal research? How did you go about reaching these conclusions?
Well, like I had said, you have to experience all this in order to understand it. Some people do get it. When you tell people your story, oh, this happened to me in family court, some people really get it and they understand. And some people just don't get it and they walk away from you. But it's just, from what I've learned and the corruption and the collusion, it just seems like it is so incestuous in these courthouses that it has got to be brought to an end.
Well, what type of detail do the readers learn from your book? what kind of insights do you share through that publication?
Well, I shared that, I had to go pro se, which meant I had to represent myself. And that, I think, was very helpful to me because, I mean, I could do it. I could handle it. You may win, you may lose cases, you may win cases. Nothing is a sure thing, even for an attorney when they go into court. But I did read that more Americans are going in and representing themselves now more than ever because they realize their attorneys have failed them.
Exactly. And now, first, give us a bit. Give us a bit about your personal background, but Miss Belinda is jumping in. Go ahead, Miss Belinda.
Yeah, Dr. Z, when she said that they realize that that their attorneys have bailed them, I just want to emphasize on that just a little bit. That it's I think about that when you have paid your money for something and you're expecting to get exactly what you paid for. And I have literally seen people pay attorneys thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to represent them. And come to find out that it was a trap. That the attorney had taken their money, knowing all the time that he never intended to defend them in the first place because he was in cahoots with the prosecutor, the judge, and maybe even the company that they were suing, or the defendant, or the it can get so crazy when you think about the fact that people have literally murdered their attorneys. And you can find this all over the internet now. And because we had an incident happen here where a young man went into his attorney's law firm and shot up looking for his attorney that had lied to him and told him that he was out of the country, knowing all the time that his attorney was in drug rehab. So, ineffective counsel is not just, that is a term that they use when you're being misrepresented. The attorney maybe have a slip up or, or ineffective in representing you. But we're talking about when it is a fix that there was never no intent to represent you or defend in your defense from the very beginning. So, I just wanted to emphasize on that a little bit. And
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Belinda.
Yeah, hopefully we can dig into that a little bit deeper, Ms. Petri, because this, I'm telling you, it's driving people to suicide.
Exactly. If I can interject, and then Ms. Petri, we're going to get you back in center stage, because for our viewers who are not familiar, they haven't lived this nightmare. I wanted to bring in a little history about how we came to America United International, because I came onto the national scene. I was dealing with legal system difficulties in the state of Indiana since the mid to late 90s. And or at the beginning of this century, really, I started interacting with people on a national basis who were describing similar problems because of the internet about 2002. And I want our viewing audience to understand that from 2002, I'm working on a national level. And then in 2016, the predecessors to America United International is called Opt-in USA. We did our first report in 2016, and it was sort of like a state of the nation, a state of this problem that Americans had come on to the internet and complained about, this type of persistent abuse of the legal process. It's like a deliberate violation of your rights, where the court system, the court officers team up with the presiding judge to deliberately disregard your rights, to reach an end that has nothing to do with a fair and impartial outcome, and barely anything to do with the facts and the law. And we identified a pattern. This was happening so widely that we were able to identify about 12 elements of every experience of every person who was undergoing this across the whole nation. And the benefit of that is that the legal establishment was portraying us in the media. They even had the late U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sandra O'Connor going around the country and assuring everyone that, while the system makes mistakes, we were all just a bunch of people who were upset and didn't quite understand how the legal system properly operated. And while there were problems, it was not this widespread corruption that Ms. Petri is talking about and Ms. Parker-Brown is talking about. And so we did that in 2016. And then by 2018, we went to the United Nations Human Rights Council, because again, I was doing this regionally at the end of 1997. We're all on the line. We're all on the internet at the beginning of this century. This is 2022. So this is 22 years doing this on a national basis. And what we went to the United Nations to say is that these individuals, we've been trying to identify, we've been trying to establish that we're not making this up, that we're not crazy, this is not in our imagination. They're using the court system to deliberately violate our rights. And that all we were doing was getting a runaround. It was no effective redress. And in October of 2018, lo and behold, the United Nations Human Rights Council basically agreed with us and said, yes, they didn't have a trial, so they couldn't come in and say who did what and who didn't do what, but they confirmed that this was not some rantings of lunatics, that it was not manifestly ill-founded to allege that the United States does not offer effective relief if you're alleging that your judge worked with unethical lawyers to weaponize the legal system, to get, to use the legal system to punish or accomplish anything but a fair and impartial resolution of the facts. So I wanted to put that in, so anyone who's viewing this video and are not familiar with this movement will realize that, we have confirmation of this from the United Nations Human Rights Council. So Ms. Petri, we got that background in place and we're going to go from there, but go ahead and tell us a bit about your personal background, and then we'll move to talking about the kind of input you're getting from through your show, through your podcast, Tell us a bit more about you though.
Okay, I had been a registered nurse for almost 23 years, and yeah, I think a lot of people know my story that I'd gotten divorced. We had co-parented well until a third party inserted themselves into our co-parenting relationship. And that third party continued to drag us through court, basically, essentially, and destroy the relationships I have with my children. So all what it came down to that they were trying to do, and they did it very well. Again, you had mentioned collusion, as Miss Belinda did too, the collusion that goes on and the attorneys that continue to fail their clients. It's just very sickening, because what happened to me should never have happened at all. And to a lot of parents, and it's happening equally to both mothers and fathers. It's happening across the board. And I've had people that I've done podcasts with, my guests have even said, this is neck to neck. This is happening to mothers and fathers. And this is destroying our children, which is our future generations. This will affect 6 future generations, according to Dr. Mark Roseman, who wrote the book, Preserving Family Ties. So the court system is not only destroying parents and making them suicidal, they're also making children suicidal as well. And it makes these judges and these attorneys predators. It makes them child abusers. They are psychological child abusers.
You know, we had someone in our audience, in fact, a pretty well-known human rights advocate, our U.S. legal system abuse challenger himself, and he talked about his success with his federal attorneys, which is tremendous. Are people understanding that when we talk about the United Nations ruling essentially that we don't have effective avenues of redress, do they understand that doesn't mean no one ever wins? That instead is that the wins come too seldom, they take too long, they cost too much. Okay, is that message getting across to your listeners? Are you thinking that they're not getting what the United Nations is saying when they say that there's not effective avenues of redress? It's basically the runaround. And I hope Ms. Belinda will come in and she does a great job explaining how, you know, people go up to the U.S. Supreme Court, come back, go this way, go to this. It's decades. That's not due process. Go ahead, Ms. Petri. How are your listeners thinking about that?
They are pretty much have said what you have just said, that things are taking too long. They've been in court. Even just trying to get a divorce, it's taken people 8 years. That's ridiculous. And it's the attorneys that are dragging it out, and the judges are helping them. And I saw even in my case that, you know, the judge would say, well, come back in 3 months, we'll reconvene and see how everything's going. Like, why do we need to do that? Just end it now. You know, whatever it is. But they won't. They'll just keep people coming back into the courtroom and spending all that money for these attorneys that aren't effective. And now I'm sorry.
No, finish. Go ahead.
Some attorneys are effective. I'm not saying all attorneys are bad, because I had a very effective attorney when I won my Superior Court case, and I did that pro se. But I needed a very effective attorney, and thank God she was there for me.
But that happens too seldomly. That's the problem.
That's just it. Right. Because I had gone to Superior Court before for my kids to get 50-50 custody, because that's what they wanted. And that's what we had been, as I said, for 10 years. But I was shot down, twice. And by that time, they were getting to being aged out of the system. So we just accepted that I would be a non-custodial parent. But yet I had to fight that child support, that the child support judge, who was very corrupt, felt she had to have, me pay close to $1,000 a month in child support after I had lost my job as a nurse based on false indications and being called mentally ill.
Ms. Petri, explain to Ms. Belinda, because I want her to respond to what I anticipate is going to be your report of what your viewers are saying, because through through Slam the Gavel, you're talking with people and they're talking about the problems, particularly about the family courts, and they're also talking about solutions. That's correct? Now, so the solutions, there is a sentiment that there's something that we can do domestically that doesn't require enforcement of this international human rights treaty that AUI focuses in on, and perhaps I need to give a little background on that. It's our contention that the legal system has become a runaround. That's what is ineffective. And America United International is a timeout on all of that. It shouldn't take decades. Yes, we can protest, we can rally in the streets, but decades of doing that, that's not due process. So the American United International is taking the position, and we've got momentum from the United Nations that this runaround is not what our country. This is not the kind of protection from corruption that our country is obliged to provide us. So they need to go in, figure out why our legal system is allowing this to happen. What is going to take to solve the problem, fix the problem. And in the meantime, those of us who have been dealing with it, who have had our lives turned upside down for decades, give us relief, set up a process to get us compensation, punish the people who did this to us, get reparations to the extent necessary. Are your guests of the mindset that we don't have to take this international human rights approach, that is not a crisis, we can still fix this thing, just by doing some grassroots advocacy? If you can tell us, and then and hopefully Ms. Belinda will respond to your input. Go ahead.
I've had some guests say that it can be done through a grassroots movement. There was a gentleman telling me that a CPS had been shut down in one of the states, I think out west, and I can't remember which one, but somehow they were shut down. And CPS is a very big problem, along with the federal funding under Title 4D of the Social Security Act. And this is how the courts are taking advantage of these parents that are arguing over custody, when really, if they could just mediate. A lot of people are just saying, if you talk to a parent who wants to go through a divorce or whatever, try to talk them out of going into family court. Try to, if you can. But again, if you're dealing with a high conflict personality disorder, you're not able to do that. And therefore you get sucked into the court system. And to hold these judges accountable should be easy to do, you would think, because they are committing crimes every day of child psychological abuse when they take a child away from a good fit parent. And these attorneys that are assisting these judges should be held accountable as well. And
but instead what we get is, people just year after year, every few years, a new crop of people come on the scene, and it's the same process over and over again. But there are some people who have been here, from the beginning of the century. One of our guest audience in the audience is Brian Kenter, a very well known family court reform advocates, and he said it's like Hotel California fighting this corruption. You check in, but you can never leave. So Ms. Belinda, has Ms. Petri given you enough that where you can respond to her viewers who think, just one more protest, was one more piece of legislation, just one more petition, and we'll fix this thing? What do you have to say to that?
Thank you, Dr. Z, and Ms. Petri, thank you so much, because I really feel strongly that we have to make it as clear as possible that these atrocities that's happening is far too long, because so many of us have had our rights deliberately, violated by agreement, which is what we call the fix is in, when there is a conspiracy between the corrupt lawyers, the judge, the child protective services, or whatever the services may be, because, they all can, sometimes it becomes so entangled where everybody got their hands in it and everybody want to get, paid, it becomes all about money. And not only that, the worst thing is that when they find out that they can just, drag it out, like you said, because they want to suck the life out of the defendant, the plaintiff, because the fix is in. So yeah, Dr. Z, we gotta some kind of way, get people to understand why AUI, why we're saying that it's cold blue. It's a red button push. It is time out, for us running around chasing the rabbit, going here, going there, and actually thinking that, like Maryann said, that, she just happened that she looked up on a good attorney that was able to represent her after she had spent, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, we can't wait for that. We cannot wait for that. That's the reason why we're saying AUI is cold blue. And we cannot let our government stand idly by, twirling their thumbs, leaning up against the wall, watching us suffer through this type of tyranny and do nothing.
Exactly.
So, that's what AUI is all about. And so, Dr. Z, I know that you can bring that home and make it more clearly because, we're winning this fight.
Yeah.
We're winning. This is not, this is serious. This is not a, well, let's see if this gonna work. Let's try and see whether or not, here goes something else. Here goes somebody else trying something else. We didn't done that. We didn't been there. And now we're going to try this. No, AUI is the solution that it have already been determined and proven what they don't do, what the government have, participated and implemented themselves in these crimes against humanity and not protecting their own citizens. So Dr. Z, could you bring that home and make it a little bit more clear?
I think it's about as you've made it as clear as it can be. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to have Mrs. Petri be the voice of, because she's talked, she can tell us how many people she's interviewed. And we want her to be the voice for anyone who has a different view on things. And before I have Ms. Petri, we're going to just we just are working you, I tell you, and the check is in the mail. It's got a lot of zeros in it, I promise.
Yes, indeed.
And a lot of commas, So this is well worth your time and effort. We had you working, talking about AUI. We're going to have you be the voice of all the listeners in the family court reform community and who have perhaps see things a bit differently than what Miss Belinda talked about. But before you say that, I want to again, I may have mentioned, I think I mentioned it before, that the inspiration for AUI is the Declaration of Independence. And if people just think back, I'm not much of a student of history, but we had 13 US states that were colonies of Britain, and on behalf of each of those states, they declared, they didn't petition, they didn't ask, that they declared that they were independent of the tyranny of the British king. And they did not do it because they didn't like a couple of things that he had come up with. They had petitioned him, they had put a lot of effort in trying to get him to be reasonable. And they finally determined that he was an undue threat, that this government, the British government, was an undue threat to the lives, the liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. And they declared that under those circumstances, it's not only the God-given right of a citizenry to revolt against such a condition, it is their obligation. And they made this declaration, and at that point, the United States of America formed. That's what we're talking about with AUI. We're making a declaration that this is intolerable. This judicial tyranny cannot be tolerated. And they didn't send that idea over to the British government, the king, and say, well, what do you think about this?
Mhm.
You know, did you hear back? Did he write back and say he that's fine with him, you know, and send us our blessings? They just declared it and proceeded to have a new nation. And that's the type. Now it's not we're not talking about creating a new country, but we are talking about a different mentality of people under the banner of America United International, that it is our government's responsibility to protect us. It's not our responsibility to be good enough to prove through our advocacy that we deserve this protection. So back to what we want you to weigh in on, Ms. Petri. We've given you all kinds of things to think about. You know, your head is probably spinning. And what I want you to do is, in an orderly fashion, one by one, don't miss a single point.
Okay.
Tell us what are the contrary views out there that you've discerned through your work and through your hosting Slam the Gavel?
A lot of the views are that when John Adams said, the way to secure liberty is to place it in the people's hands, that is to give them the power at all times to defend it in the legislature and in the courts. And it's not, you know, we're not living back in the 1700s. Now we are in just wallowing in corruption. I have interviewed some guests, you know, they've written books on how they would fix the situation. And I interviewed a guest, Kenneth Gottfried. He wrote a book, Child Abusers in Black Robes. And we should call these people out for what they are. And, you know, if we could place them under citizen's arrest. I mean, if you try to think this through, you know, when a judge is taking a child away from a good fit parent, can you say to the bailiff, I want the judge put, you know, placed under arrest, and I want the opposing attorney placed under arrest. This is completely wrong. You know, can this be done? And, you know, I don't know. The answer is I don't know. You know, because I had represented myself pro se, and, you know, you have to be mentally strong to do that while they're calling you mentally ill. But, you know, you have to keep being persistent. And, you know, people are having protests at courthouses. I mean, I stood outside of the Allegheny courthouse here holding a sign saying family court corruption. And, you know, I know they want to call it Family Court Corruption Awareness Month. Why don't we just call it Family Court Corruption every day? And get serious about it. And I think if we had a lot of people protesting, holding signs, and in front of these courthouses, even signs with their judges' names, and bring, I mean, awareness has to be brought to the public. It has to be brought to the media, whether they like it or not. The problem is the media is not helping us.
There you go.
And they're not even helping, you know, even people that have, you know, served time of, I interviewed one man, he served 29 years and he shouldn't have done that. And the media has to be aware of all of this stuff and report it, but they're afraid of the judges as well. And I don't understand why these judges have all this power, and it needs to be taken away.
Well, in the United Nations, they took the position that is a woefully inadequate oversight, that we are entitled to have our concerns addressed by a fair and impartial body. But what's happening is we're alleging this judicial corruption, and we have to go to judges. You know, all the legislators, the executive branch, they defer to the judges. So they are the final decision makers about their integrity. And you made the excellent point of the major media, they're not covering this. You know, I hope people understand that the notion that if we could pull together a critical mass of protests to identify these problems and wield the power of democracy, and you know, we were flooding the streets you know, like we saw it during the Black Lives Matters movement. And we were flooding the ballots, of course they talk about the voting corruption, and but we were voting people in and we were voting people out. That very well could be all that was necessary to turn these things around. But what people are not getting is that part of the definition of why it's ineffective is if we've tried to reach that critical mass for, at this point, just looking at this century, 22 years, we're into the 22nd year.
Right.
That's not effective. That's not due process. So people, I'm not sure that people are getting that all AUI is saying is, yes, there are a lot of things that may work. There are a lot of things that we should keep striving for. You know, it is going to take a significant amount of time to turn our legal system around. It's not going to be done with a snap of fingers. I think you said you had guests that projected 10 or 15 years, but to go 20, 30 years without relief, to some people who don't even live long enough, they lose their children, they go to prison. That's not effective avenues of redress. Effectiveness, part of it is it has to be reasonably prompt. So yes, yes, support AUI. Take the position that the United States is not living up to its obligation under international law. Support us. That doesn't mean you don't go out to the protest. That doesn't mean you don't sign the petition. You're just layering on top of that the thought, the message that, by the way, I'm still doing this, but it's taking too long. I'm going to do this until I die. But don't think for a minute that I think this is what I'm obliged to do. You owe me more as an American citizen than this runaround. Ms. Belinda, you were trying to interject.
Oh, Dr. Z, you know, I'm telling you, I have to thank you so much, Ms. Petri, for, just sharing about how convoluted the and beat down that people can, be when these type of atrocities are taking place in their life. And then you say they come back and they put the label of mentally ill on you. And when you think about that, the trauma, the agony, the anxiety, the pain, the suffering of losing and being torn and ripped apart from your family or whatever the situation may be. And then you out there, you're trying to protest, you trying to organize and mobilize people and educate people or reach out and say, help me, screaming and howling and jumping up and down with your hair stuck up on your head, trying to protest and rally with a microphone at the back of your car and, posters and signs and driving around at the grocery stores and trying to inform, look what's happening to me. And nobody, you may get a crowd, you may get a little pop up here, you may get a spurt there, you may even get a donation. But the truth of the matter is how much can you take before you literally break down? How much can you go through before you realize that they never intended to help you in the first place?
Exactly. And that's all. And people talk about, let's say, for example, getting rid of judicial immunity. And, that's a very popular concept. I think that is oh, you ought to be able to sue the judge. I think that it just sounds good to people, but they don't seem to what we're not getting is that the judges are not supposed to be immune from prosecution. They're not supposed to be immune from discipline. They're not supposed to be immune from impeachment. The only thing they're supposed to have an immunity from is that you can't sue them to get a monetary judgment against them. And in our movement, and everybody has a right to support what they want to support. But I still have to say, if you eliminate your immunity and you get the right to sue a judge, what's good is it if you're just gonna go in front of his friends and a bunch of corruption. I've filed a legal lawsuit against a judge who, as far as I'm concerned, my arguments is that he had lost the cloak of immunity because he did not have jurisdiction to do what he did. Those of us who are on here who know about judicial immunity is only supposed to protect the judge if he or she has jurisdiction over the case. And I argued he acted without jurisdiction. So let's say, for example, if a probate court judge ordered you to prison, he would act without jurisdiction, and you could sue them for a civil lawsuit and get money damages in theory. Well, the federal judge that I had the case before just ruled that, he was entitled to immunity, and my arguments didn't make any difference. So, we've got to say to the United States of America, it is your job to go in and figure out why it's not working, because it's not working. And in the meantime, make us whole. Ms. Petri, I'm going to let you interject, and then Ms. Belinda, we're coming on up on the end of the hour, but I want you to explain that FEMA concept, because you know it so well, because you're in a state that deals with natural disasters. But Ms. Petri, come on in and weigh in to whatever extent you'd like.
Well, it's, for instance, I did file a federal lawsuit against the individuals that totally destroyed not just my career, but my children as well. And I submitted exhibits to the federal judge. He was a magistrate. He just wanted to dismiss the case without reading the exhibits. He actually admitted that he did not read the exhibits, which is evidence. These people aren't even doing their jobs. You can't make them do their jobs. And this is what's so frustrating, is like, I feel like with Slam the Gavel podcast, I'm getting parents on here and they're telling their story. And their story may help someone else. They may have said something that can help another parent's case, for instance. But I feel that's my job, is to get their voices heard. Yes. And their judges exposed. And I think exposing these people as quickly as possible, even low-life caseworkers. And these CPS caseworkers, I'm sure there are some good ones out there. I haven't ever met one, but expose these people, expose where they're coming from, and let it rip, because I think that's what needs to happen, along with what you said, Dr. Zena, about, how the Black Lives Matter happened. I think this should be happening with the court system now.
Exactly.
I don't know why we're waiting.
Yes, we can mobilize to make that happen. But guess what? United States needs to start the process of giving us relief now. Not wait until we have 100,000 people in the street. And another thing, that with regard to exposure, I would only add that we need to be strategic with our exposure, because if we are just talking with each other, because one of the things that America United International, and someone was asking, how is the Biden administration responding? And we launched at the end of October, and shortly after that, we got confirmation from the International Criminal Court that they would advise us of their decision as to whether that they would investigate President Biden for his bystanding, because believe it or not, even though he's only recently been in office, his failure to properly deal with this situation, because the Trump administration in January acknowledged that we had this problem, that there was no effective redress. We were just basically getting a runaround. But his administration basically said, yes, it's terrible, but we got other things to do. So in June, we said, what about that, President Biden? Because, If it's, there's no such thing as certain segments of our population getting effective redress and others not, because you all got something to do. It's privileges and immunity. And he took his own good time. So America United International asked that he be investigated for bystanding, because that's a crime against humanity.
Mhm.
And then lo and behold, less than 30 days later, he was the first sitting president this century that directly acknowledged that we had reached out to his administration and indicated that the State Department would give us a direct reply. But the point is, where was I going with that?
With the FEMA.
So, okay. The point is that we can't just keep waiting. People are talking about, well, my lawyer won. Well, is that lawyer going to represent all the people who are dealing with this corruption? How many of us are there? What do you say, Ms. Belinda, to the people that talk in terms of, well, let's keep just pushing and let's just keep filing lawsuits? The lawyer is filing a lawsuit before the same judiciary that we're saying needs to be dramatically changed. What are we missing insofar as reaching people, that while you still keep filing lawsuits, while you still keep doing what you're doing, you also support AUI and its proclamation that the United States obligation to come in and fix this? And now I remember you're going to talk about the FEMA and how that works here.
I love the way you said that, Dr. Z, because, that's one of the things that we want people to know. If you can rally up a Britney Spears, because I don't know, the people that I know Miss Petri have had on her show, they may be celebrities, they may not. Everybody is not a Britney Spears. Everybody does not have a George Floyd situation, especially when it comes to, these families that are, already trapped in this cesspool of struggling to be able to afford a lawyer. Okay. Lesson on somebody, they being popular enough to rally a crowd like a situation like Britney Spears. Oh my God, we may never get that, with these type of atrocities that's happening to people. So, but I want to say that when it comes to, AUI and the successes and the victory and that it have already been determined, why not support this campaign? Why not have this campaign as a hub for whatever it is that you're doing? I feel like, if AUI was on the scene before Britney Spears actually, had her situation, and AUI could have been in front of that, we would be a whole lot, farther than where we are now. But nevertheless, we're here now. And what we're saying is that no one else have accomplished and been able to get the response that we have gotten from our government. That's not about competition. That's not about somebody getting credit. What we're doing is for all of us, and it's so important that we understand that if AUI have the support to become sustainable, it's like, what I'm trying to describe is give you a real good example. It's almost like all heaven backing you up. It's like you become a force to be reckoned with. And that's what we need right now for the people that are facing. We can't wait for, maybe one little win here or one little win over there. What about everybody else that can't win? Exactly. So that's where AUI come in at, is getting, in the front the people supporting AUI so that we can establish a FEMA, a place where we can go, somewhere where we can take our cases, or take, you know, the situations, and, you know, have somebody there that, you know, when a FEMA is what we call it, is a federal emergency management agency, where we have somewhere to take our stuff, you know, and not the fox guarding the hen house. Not, you know, oh, well, you know, file this, file that, and then it's going to get rubber stamped, like Ms. Petri just said. You know, they don't even read it. They don't even do their job. They don't care. They balled it up and throw it in the garbage. So with a FEMA, you know, it's going to, you know, that's what AUI is calling for. A FEMA is so that we can have a safe place, somewhere where we can go, somebody that we can trust, that's going to look at our stuff and be able to make the determination whether or not the fix is in.
And we're going to make sure, and we'll be watchdogs to make sure that, and, you know, I remember the point I was going to make, what I was saying about this exposure. We got the Biden administration to say that the State Department was going to give us a reply. And we said to the community, okay, if you have your case, if you got a website or whatever, we created a wave. Weaponization of America's legal system very much should and must end. And we said, put your information on this page, because the Biden administration is going to have the State Department give a response. So let them go in and hear about our stories. All you have to do is give a link to where you already have the story detailed. Okay. And, you know, people weren't responding. So if we're out here exposing, Maryann, this is what I'm saying. But then when you get a government body that says, okay, we're going to give you a response, but they refuse to put the information where the government body can see it, then, you know, we're all over the place. And we could take a position that, well, all of this online exposure, they'll find out. But centralizing the exposure is important too. Now, we're going to let you close out. We only got a few minutes to round off an hour. So go ahead, Ms. Petri, and take another minute or so to just give your closing thoughts, and then I'll close us out for the evening.
I'd like to see more support in these courtrooms, whether it be family court, criminal court. There should be more court watchers filling the pews. And I know, as I said before, people work full-time jobs, you know, but there are people that are retired, and these pews have to be filled every day. And these judges have to be watched very closely every day. They're just not being held accountable. I really don't know how I, you know, as one person can get them to be held accountable. You know, I can call them on it. I can complain to the appropriate places. They, you know, I'm just at a loss sometimes.
Well, see, that's just it, Ms. Petri. It is not our obligation to hold them accountable. It is our government, is our nation's international, constitutional, that's a fundamental obligation of a country, of a government, to protect its citizens from abuse of power by people who are in government. That's a that's their obligation. Our obligation is to demand that they live up to that. And to the extent that they don't, then the international human rights community needs to be aware of that. The international anti-corruption community needs to be aware of that. But if we don't strategically pull our complaints, one of the biggest obstacles that we're encountering is they're coming to the conclusion that it's not that many of us. The United Nations would not go any further based on what we presented to them in 2018, because they're like, we need to be convinced that this is why a gross problem. So, you know, we've got to centralize so that that the people who have the power to give us relief, can see that we're here. And our organization has been at the forefront of getting audiences with so many international audiences. I mean, with so many international bodies that can provide us relief. And it's like the people in our community, like they refuse to talk to them. Like, I'm not going to tell them anything. And so, yes, we need to court washers. We need protests. We need to flood the streets. But I would say we also
may win one, and we may win one, and we may not.
Exactly. What we need to do is stop seeing it as our responsibility to protect ourselves, and see it as the United States government obligation to protect us. We are the citizens. That's their job. That is what America United International is insisting on. And we have the support of the international community, United Nations. We've got the International Criminal Court that's pledging to look into what we're doing, and we're not talking to them. We even got President Biden saying that they're gonna that the State Department will look into it, and we're like, I refuse. I don't care. I don't want to hear it. I refuse. It's not making a lot of sense, and hopefully that message can get brought home. Everyone, please go to www.americaunitedinternational.net and learn more about our campaign and our initiatives. Join our efforts and donate so we can sustain this work. Even small contributions go far when many people contribute. So we're going to be filing our lawsuits and doing our protests and court watching and everything we do, but we need to sustain the demand, our declaration that it's time out for this weaponization of the legal system, and it's time out asking us to live and die for year in and year out, begging our government to meet their obligations that's clear under the Constitution, that's clear under other federal law, that's clear under international treaties. AUI is YOU, is our solution, and it's our job to sustain this, to join the international community. They're not going to fight this fight for us. We've got to accept their support and tell them we're willing to back them if they back us. None of us caused this abuse of the U.S. legal system, but working together, we can certainly put pressure on our country to do what it's obliged to do to fix the situation. In the meantime, we ask you to be safe and keep the faith. Ms. Belinda, 1 minute, you want to close us out?
Well, I just want to thank everyone. We had some really good comments coming in on the chat from our guest, Dr. Z, and I just want to thank them all, and for them to look forward to more interviews like this and also participating in these interviews. We are winning. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you, Ms. Petri. You have been.
Thank you, Ms. Petri. You've just been a wonderful guest, and we look forward to having you back again real soon. But in the meantime, good night, everybody, and we'll see you next time.